Since I fell ill over 20 years ago, I've discovered a surprising, wonderful secret. No matter how terrible my loss, it leads to gains in other parts of my life, if only I look for those seeds of possibility and nurture them into full bloom. For instance, when I got sick, my life began to implode. First I lost my health, then my job, next my marriage and chance to have children, and for 14 years I could barely leave my house. But years later I realized that I had gained things too. One of my best gains was how those losses provided me a window of opportunity to try out my dream to live part-time in Paris.
Plus petit, s'il vous plaît.
In my book, I've written about how my desire to find a silver lining, even in hard times, has been part of my character since I was a child growing up in Africa. I was born with a little of this already in me, but the early years of my illness sorely tested my ability to find silver linings. Not only had my life plunged off a cliff, but I didn't like seeing myself feeling angry and like a victim at times, even though I had reasons to be bitter. Eventually, though, I realized that those kinds of feelings made it much harder to overcome adversity and create a good life despite it. So instead, I chose to take personal responsibility for myself and seek ways to transcend misfortune. So now when I lose something from my life, I try to follow up my grief by asking myself, what might I gain from this experience? Then I try to focus on developing those possible gains rather than on my loss. But it requires great discipline, patience, and courage because it can take a long time for ideas and answers to emerge. An important trick to this secret I found is to savor my gains and appreciate what I have while I have it. For example, when I lost my marriage, I felt overwhelmed by grief. It took me a while to realize that a possible gain from my divorce might be that I had a better chance to cultivate my interior self, which I found way easier to do because I had more time and space around me. When I could see this potential gain, I began to see this part of my divorce experience as a precious time in a sense. It led me to reflect upon things like who I wanted to be and what dreams I still had for my life. And since part of who I wanted to be was someone who could create a banquet out of the crumbs of my shattered life, I thought about ways I might work toward that goal, including what changes I would need to make in myself. Even Nelson Mandela, who lived through a horrific experience, found gains within it. Spending 28 years of his life in prison was a tragedy, Mandela said, but it also offered him some opportunities, such as giving him the chance to sit down and think, which he had found hard to do in the outside world, and to work on changing himself. I believe this is one of the reasons why Mandela entered prison a strong man, but by the time he was released, he had become a very powerful person. Even though I've spent years developing my skills for overcoming adversity and finding the gains hidden within it, I still have to practice those skills and keep choosing to use them, in perhaps a similar way to how a professional tennis player spends years developing her tennis skills, but then must keep practicing them to play tennis as well as she can. I would certainly never choose my illness, but in the end, I found so many gains and gifts within the experience that I wrote a book about them. To buy my book, click on the link in the description below this video or visit annelipscomb.com.